I remember Nelson Mandela telling us, all of us who were candidates for whichever sphere of government in South Africa, he said to us, if you are in politics because you want money, then go into business. If you are in politics because you want a job, then go and learn a skill at a university. But if you are in politics because you have a burning ideal in your heart and you have the desire to improve the lives of people, then you can be my candidate. And so we had to decide money, job, or ideals. And I think that that is a very important thing, because if you decide that it is ideals, then you must treat an election process as 10 parts of the body. So if you can excuse that drawing, and I don't know if you can see it, but I'll explain it as I go on. That basically is a very badly drawn body. And any candidate, any party, any political movement, any organization, the first part of the body that is important is that part there, the heart. You've got to know your heart, because your heart decides what it is that you believe, what it is that you are passionate about, what it is that wants you to make a difference. So you must know your heart. And so we found it easy in South Africa because our hearts were burning for freedom, for liberation. Our hearts were burning for human rights because we didn't have any rights. We wanted freedom because we knew what it meant to be enslaved. We wanted human rights because we knew what it meant to be denied. And we wanted democracy because we knew what it was right not to have a say in your life. And so we were coming into that election as a liberation movement. We therefore knew that we needed to build a united nation because we had been a divided nation. We knew that we had to build non-racialism because we were the victims of racism. We knew that we needed to overcome poverty because we were a poor people. All blacks were by and large poor. And that shaped the burning desire in that part of our body called the heart. So I would say to you all, before you go further with your elections, ask yourself, what is in your heart? What is motivating you? What is driving you? And that will begin to answer the rest of the 10 questions. The second important part of the body that you've got to look at is number 2, the spine. What is your backbone? What are the values that you will fall by or stand by? Are you a jellyfish with no backbone? Anyone can take you away from your path? Or are you driven by your values? And what are those values? And so we knew that if we do nothing else, we must give our people dignity. They cannot live like they used to live before. We must give them equality, because apartheid had divided us and made some of us more equal and some of us less equal. We needed to make sure that our values were such. If we stood for equality between black and white, then we couldn't say that we endorse inequality for men and women. If you stand by the value of equality, it cuts everything. You can't then say, yeah, it's okay for black and white to be equal, but not men and women. Not Christians and Muslims or Jews. Equality and those values that form your spine, your backbone, is such a thing that if you stand for it, dignity for one, it's dignity for all. Equality for one, it's equality for all, even if you don't like the lifestyle of people. And that's why South Africa, even before it became a democracy, decided against the instincts of our people and our religions and everything. We decided men and women will be equal, gays and straights will be equal, and everyone who is human being enjoys equal human dignity. And that is the spine that gives you, and you will face your people with the values that you have. The third part of the body that is important is what I call your finger. That finger is important because it contains your fingerprint. What is your identity? Wherever you go in the world, that is what you are identified by. Like you go with your passport to any airport, they will find your fingerprint. And the key question we asked ourselves about our fingerprint in South Africa was, where do we stand on the left to right spectrum? Are we a party of the ultra-right or the ultra-left? Are we a party of the left or the right? Are we a center-left or a center-right party, or are we a centrist party? We started off being on the left, and as we began to understand the world, we ended up on the center left. We started off as a socialist movement, we ended up as a social democratic movement. You've got to ask yourself what your fingerprint is all about. Are you conservative? Are you liberal? Are you progressive? If you don't answer those kind of questions, you don't know what you stand for. Your fingerprint will confuse people. People will see that you're wearing gloves all the time because you're trying to hide something. And so that third part of your body is a very, very important part that establishes your identity. The fourth part of the body is your eye. How far do you see? There are some who see only the election and want to win. And then they like the dogs in the townships. They run after the car, barking. When they catch the car, they've got no license to drive. So how far do you see? Do you see the election? Do you see forming a government? And then you govern. And you don't have a plan to govern. So maybe you see for the first term, and therefore you make all shortcut decisions. You will get rid of that director general, you will get rid of that official, you will get rid of that one, and then you have no memory. You only have memory sticks that you push into your computer, but you have no hard drive that will cause you to govern right into the future and make decisions for the future. You are only making decisions in the short term. But if your vision, established by your eye, is one that goes long before you are dead, long after you've lost power, then you have the possibility of losing power but retaining a legacy. Because you will forever know that that bridge stands there because I was the architect, I was not necessarily the engineer. That legacy of services to the people, I initiated it, but I was not the architect. That economic plan, I was the architect and I was the foundation layer, but I did not complete the building. Everyone will know that that is your vision. And so we decided to establish a vision that was not necessarily popular, a vision of a reconciled nation between black and white. And Nelson Mandela had to go out to tell the people who had been robbed of their land that if we want to live together in a free South Africa, then we must respect the mechanisms to have land transformation and land given back to the blacks who had been dispossessed. But we will see compensation in the meantime. That reconciliation meant that you don't destroy what you want to inherit. It's very important because some people, they are so eager to deliver some things to people that they will destroy the capacity of the country forever. You will take the land, but not necessarily have farmers who can keep the food production going. And so how do you see into the future and not just what is in front of you? So the vision that you establish is very, very important. The fifth point is your feet. Where it's that thing that touches the ground. One foot stands as part of a regional and global community. The other foot stands amongst the people that you want to represent. So the question is, who is your constituency? What's the nature of the people that you stand for? And so we knew that we were fighting a liberation movement for black people, and therefore poor working black people would always be the primary constituency of the African National Congress. But we also knew that we could not deliver to our primary constituency if we ignore or destroy other constituencies. Therefore, the question, how do we establish a program to bring other constituencies into alliance or relationship with our constituencies? So if you stand for workers, can you destroy the factories so that tomorrow those who voted for you will have no jobs? Can you stand for farm workers and then take away the farms and then not produce and create unemployment? And so Nelson Mandela, when he was released from jail, he stood on the balcony of the city hall and said to all the people of the world, we will nationalize the mines, and we will nationalize the farms, and we will nationalize the factories. And everyone cheered because they thought this was going to be what we needed. Then when he looked at where his other foot was, he realized that after the Berlin Wall fell, that nationalization was no longer the sexy thing it was, while communism was strong. And Nelson Mandela had to go back and say, we are now standing for growth, employment, and redistribution, and we will not choose methodologies over outcomes. So it's establishing your outcome and then choosing methodologies rather than prioritizing methodologies and mechanisms that will undermine your outcome. So that part, who you represent and where you stand in the world or in the region, is very, very important. The seventh part of the body that is very important then is your mind. Oh no, the sixth part is your ear. Once you know what you believe from your heart, and then you know what you stand for from your values, and then you have a sense of who you are, your identity as a party, as a candidate, as an organization, and then you know your vision, what your eye is seeing, where you want to go, your destination. When you know that, and you know who the people are that you want to represent and what the world is like, then you take those few things and you use your ear. You use that part of your body, your ear. And I remember Nelson Mandela in that first election, he drew thousands of people to the rallies. We filled the stadiums with thousands of people and the halls. And Nelson Mandela said, not one of us will speak for the first 5 hours. For 5 hours, the candidates could not speak, including Nelson Mandela. He had people stand up in long lines with microphones all over the place. And then he would point to number one in that queue, number one in that queue, number one in that queue, and they each had 3 minutes to say what was their problem and what they suggest. And all we did was to write it down. And so we sat for 5 hours listening to hundreds of people. And people would get up and say, I am Sibusiso and I live in Soweto, and we have not had a tap in near our place for 1 kilometer, and I've had to take my child out of school because that child had to fetch water from the river every day. What can you do? And we wrote down water. The other one said, when it is winter, my child can't study and she's failing exams because we have no lights in the house, and we had to write down electricity. And the other one said that the school is so bad that the windows are all broken, and we wrote down schools. And so we had to do it across the country for 5 hours in every rally, not speaking. Nelson Mandela banned us from speaking because these were listening rallies. You only had to use your ear. At the end of it, he got up and he said, we have listened to you in Soweto, and we have heard that the 20 most important things that you have told us today is that you have no water, that you have no electricity, that your schools are bad, that the municipal officials don't collect your trash, this, that, and the other. And we will now go away and see how we can respond to it. So that was only after the manifesto could we speak. So before a manifesto was written, we did not speak. We listened. But we went with our beliefs, our ideals, our vision, and our values to the people. And then we listened to their concrete suggestions to see whether they fit into our ideals. If someone stood up and said, Mr. President, I want you to take all the homosexuals out of Khayelitsha Township because we don't like them. Mr. President will say, I'm sorry, but I have to say to you, that is not part of our values and our beliefs. We have fought for equality between black and white, and we would be destroying our vision and our beliefs if we suddenly discriminated between homosexuals and heterosexuals. Someone would get up and say, Mr. President, can we restore the order in the house so that women listen to men again? The president would get up and say, we have had women standing in the front lines of our struggle, and we have seen more bravery from women than we have sometimes seen from men, and therefore we are sorry, my brother, we cannot accommodate your belief. But maybe you are interested in the services we will deliver. So that is a very, very important part of your body. Number 6, the ear. And everything you have heard, you then combine with everything you believe and your vision. And you then take it to number 7, the mind. That's not hair, that's the mind. And your mind works out firstly. What is the policy of the organization or the party or the movement that you represent? Because policy is for that. Then you take your policy, because a policy is then everything that you must do. If there's problems with water, and there's problems with electricity, and problems with education, and problems with health, and problems with welfare, and problems with infrastructure, all of those kind of things, you put it all into your policy document. but it is not yet what you sell the people, because you haven't tested your policies against your budget, your policies against your talent, your policy against your human resources, your policies against your capacity, whether you have enough engineers, and therefore you don't go out, but you establish the policy as the document of your party to establish now what it is that you want to do towards your long-term vision. The second thing you do is that you move from your policies and you say, if we win the election for the next 5 years, then this will be the program that every one of our members will stand for in the government or in that parliament or in the Congress or in the Senate or wherever they stand, the local government. Whether they are governing or whether they are opposing. Because it is more important when you have lost the election and you're standing in the opposition benches to hold the government accountable, not only on their mistakes, but against your policy as well. So that you can always say, if we had won this election, we would not have allowed this government to build bridges and roads only in the rich area. We would have ensured, see our manifesto and our policy say, we would have spent our infrastructure budget in the poor townships, the favelas and so forth. There we would have started, and then they have taken this money and used it in the big cities only to look after the rich. So you also have a program for opposition, and then so the policy is for your party. The program is for when you are in government. The third thing that your mind works through is your manifesto. Or what is the other word for manifesto? It's a manifesto. And that manifesto is what you are able to communicate to people. They don't want to read your long policy documents. Some of them will. Some of them will read your program. But they need to hear your manifesto. And your manifesto has two components. It has enough detail to show that you know what you're talking about and that you've listened to them. And it has enough breadth to appeal to a whole lot of people. And so then you must devise your manifesto that is absolutely critical. By the time you reach your manifesto, you would have done 2 or 3 things, and this is what the ANC did. We engaged civil society, because it's important to engage civil society before the election and to make them part of your policy, program and manifesto development. Otherwise, they will be the first ones after the election to oppose your policy, your program and your manifesto. So rather get the expertise in before the time. The second thing is to get experts. And you ask the experts, if I want to give water to Soweto, how much will it cost? And the experts will say it will cost so many dollars. And you will then ask other experts, do we have so many dollars? And if they say we have half of it, then your manifesto will say 50% of the residents of Soweto will have water in the first 5 years of our government, and we ask the other 50% to be patient while we get in the money. It's an honest manifesto that you put out to people. You will ask, when they say we need roads, you will ask experts, how many engineers do we need if we are going to supply roads to the whole of Khayelitsha? And they will say, we need 10 civil engineers, 10 mechanical, and so forth, but we only have 2 of each. Then you will say the road building program in Khayelitsha will take us 10 years to complete. We promise to have 30% of Khayelitsha with tarred roads, but in the meantime, we will ensure that there is at least gravel or stone that will be on the rest of the roads so that our people don't suffer too much. So do you see how policy becomes program and program becomes manifesto? And that's absolutely critical, and that is where your heart and your spine meets your vision and what you have heard from the people. It all comes together in your mind, number 7. That brings us then to the 8th part of the body, which is your hands. That's the part that does things, the action. And the key questions of the hand is the budget, the human resource, the capacity, and all of those things that are absolutely, that turns your manifesto from promises to action. It's your hands are the difference between a promise and a plan. Because politicians get a bad name for making promises and they're not keeping it. The ANC has never used the word promise ever in its election campaign. We've banned the use of the word promise. We never go to people and say, we promise to bring you water or we promise to bring you books. We always say, our plan is that 10% of our children will have books, that 50% of the people of this community will have a road in 5 years, and our plan is that we will. And so the ANC's election campaign was very detailed because we got the experts and everyone else, and that's why the ANC's posters, it was a big debate between whether we go with a sentiment of liberation or whether we go with a plan for the future. And the majority of us wanted to go with a sentiment of liberation because all we needed to do was to say, the ANC freed you, vote for the ANC. The ANC brought you equal rights, vote for the ANC. The ANC brought you human rights, vote for the ANC. And then Nelson Mandela said, then what will we say in the second election? When sentiment is waning, where it doesn't matter anymore. And so we decided to go with what we heard. That people all stood up and said, Comrade Mandela, we thank you very much for your sacrifice, but we need water. They got up and we say, the ANC is the most glorious liberation movement, and now we are looking to you to give our children education. So we could go with the first part of what they said, or we could go with the second part. And so we decided mostly to go with the second part. And that's why the ANC's main slogan was jobs, services, and dignity. In that order. And that's why the ANC's posters was 3 million electricity connections in 5 years. Why? Because we worked out the budget and looked at the capacity. Even though we had 50 million people, we promised 3 million. We promised 5 million houses in 5 years, even though we had 10 million people not living in homes. We promised 1 million water connections in 5 years. Why? Because we knew we first had to lay the big pipes from the dams into the townships before we can lay the little pipes into people's homes. And within the ANC, we thought if we go with 1 million, 3 million, and 5 million, the people will kill us. The response was surprising because for the first time people saw a political party that wasn't populist, that wasn't saying what people wanted to hear, but had heard people and had processed what people had said against the budget, against the capacity, and against the ability of the government to deliver. And so that's absolutely critical, that your hands show that you have a plan based on budgets and all of those kind of things. That brings us to number 9. That's the face. Only number 9 is, who is the personality whose face will be put up? And we decided there will only be one face that we will put up in the first election, which is Nelson Mandela, the second election, Thabo Mbeki, the third election, Jacob Zuma. Even though I was running for governor of the Western Cape, my face was not put up. And that was not a problem. Because we needed to show that we were a disciplined party. A party that puts up too many faces will give the projection to the people that there are too many elephants wanting to fight. Too many strong personalities contending for power. Too many distractions. And so that was absolutely critical. And then the last one is that part, the mouth. Then it is, how do you communicate? Because now you've got all the things. You know what you believe. You know what you stand for. You know what your vision is. You know what you have heard. You know what your policy, your program, and your manifesto is. And then you go out. That's when you start using your mouth to communicate to people. I hope that was useful, and I'm willing later to take any number of questions that you may have. Thank you very much.